Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and we are all in for a real treat today with today's featured guest and fellow entrepreneur, because this is someone who I can already tell he is a true executive in every sense of the world. And I know that we are inevitably going to talk a lot about relationships today, because it seems like no matter what this guy has worked on, relationships are a core thread of all the things that are meaningful to him, which is important because he has bought businesses, he has sold businesses, he's rebuilt businesses, and he, of course, is a business owner himself. He's one of us as a fellow entrepreneur. So let me introduce you to Darek Hahn. Darek is a relationship-based CEO, starting his career in facilities, adding IT to his resume in the early 2000s, then moving to leadership roles in a number of startups before leading a team that acquired an IT managed service provider in 2016. They then rebuilt the company after it had lost a large contract and sold the company to a cybersecurity firm in 2021. Then in 2024, Darek started a new IT managed service provider to focus on what he felt was the missing component for many providers, of course, relationships, which is so much of what we're going to talk about today. I'm not going to say anything else. I'm super excited about this. Let's dive straight into my interview with Darek Hahn. All right, Darek, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it. Excited.
Heck yes. I know we're both probably going to say the word relationships many times today. So before we start getting into that stuff, take us beyond the bio. Who's Darek? How did you start doing all these cool things?
So I would say the most exciting part of my career has been that I watched my mother start a business when I was in junior high school through high school, and grew up seeing her start it, grow it, and then ended up selling it. And I got that adventure. And it was kind of always in my genes, but I was always nervous about not having the money and not having a paycheck. And it wasn't until we got to this adventure where I had the opportunity to buy an IT company that I said, okay, let me give it a shot and see what happened. I wasn't worried about having money in the bank at that point. So it made it much easier. So I think, seeing how my mother created the environment she is where I got the relationship component from, really made a difference in my life.
Yeah, I love that overview, and especially huge shout out to your mom, because it's those early influences. It shapes the way that we see the world, and particularly through your lens, Darek. I don't usually go here on air, but I think you'll have some interesting insights here. I think that the way we use the term entrepreneur, it's evolved. It's in some cases it's devolved. It's such an interesting term to throw around, and especially when I look at your career, I love the fact you heard me call it out at the top of the episode. Is that it seems to me like you know what it means to step into the executive role, the CEO. And I think that's a little bit different than the way that most people view entrepreneurship is, they're just hustling and figuring things out along the way. Talk to me about your vantage point, seeing your mom, seeing your own entrepreneurial journey. What is that CEO title versus entrepreneur? Are they the same? Are they different in your mind? I'd love to hear some insights there.
It's interesting you bring that up. I see the entrepreneur to me is somebody who just gets excited about growing something. And that's one component of it. CEO to me is about leadership. It's about running an organization and people. And that's where the relationship comes in. I have a job. My job is to orchestrate. I'll call it the orchestra conductor. And my job is to manage the people and create opportunities for them to succeed. I think sometimes entrepreneurs get stuck in the mindset that I've got to do it. I'm me, I. And it's really the team that creates that environment and creates opportunity for growth.
Yeah, that's such an important distinction. I'm actually really glad that I asked that, because I love those insights there. I think that's super valuable, and we've all been on both sides of that coin. And I think that entrepreneurial excitement, it's key for us to get something off the ground, but then it is stepping into that bigger role, and you call out other people. They're such an essential part of our entrepreneurial journeys of any business's growth. Walk us through your business life or timeline, because you've done so many things. You've acquired firms, you've sold firms, you obviously started your own now again in 2024. Walk us through what those businesses looked like and what were those inflection points along the way.
So I have to say it started with in 1998 when I moved to New Jersey, and I worked for a quasi startup. It was owned by a company in France, and we were relocating a bunch of divisions here to New Jersey. And in that process, I got to watch management and watch leadership. At that point, I was in facilities. IT was my responsibility, but I just hired a company to do it. So I got that first experience with a IT service provider, which I am running today, and transitioned from there to a true startup that had gotten funding in the early 2000s. We developed a laser diode for fiber optic networks. I got to help build out an R&D center, a production facility, and again, had IT under me. I got to watch really bad management in that organization, and stayed there for 5 years, really learned a lot. We sold off parts of the business. That's where I ended up getting IT certifications and kind of did a role as IT support. Didn't like that at all. Decided to stay in management. Moved to a new true startup that was relocating from upstate New York to New Jersey. Got involved with that. That unfortunately didn't pan out. Moved to a nutraceutical company that was a startup, was responsible for IT infrastructure, et cetera. All of those experiences up to the next job, which is at the end of that, the IT provider I'd hired offered me a consulting gig. This was early 2011 or so. And it went well. 2012, they hired me. And that's when I had my first experience working for an IT service provider. All that experience up to there was learning. And this is what I tell a lot of guys that I mentor today, is the experience you have as a young employee of other companies is invaluable. You should learn from good and bad leaders. I had good ones and I had bad ones, and I learned a ton about how important the people are around me, and the companies that are successful really use their people well and work together with them. It's a partnership. It's not, I'm the boss and you do what I say. And so in 2016, when we acquired the IT provider I was working for, we had to restructure, and I went through a whole period of becoming all of a sudden I'm a CEO of a company and I'm not really sure what I should do. And I had a lot of imposter syndrome and all that. And it wasn't until I started getting my own mentors, which is why I'm really a big fan of mentorship and groups that you can get involved in. In that process, I started learning more about myself and learning to look at myself. And that's where I coined the phrase that I'm an orchestra conductor. And that's my job when I'm dealing with as a CEO. And it was a learning experience for myself through those 5 years we owned the company. And then when we sold it, got to watch a new company come in, have a great plan, but not great execution. We started the new company in 2023, or 24, and we were actually going to buy a division back from that company that acquired us, but that didn't work out. So we just moved on. And what I've really found in this iteration is how important the team is. I've really been much more cognizant of who I'm bringing into the team, who we're making a part of it, how we're organizing those people, and what they bring to the table. And it has been a joy to work with the team I've got right now, because everybody is just all on board, all excited. There's been a bunch of talk today because the last 2 days we've closed 2 new deals, and that's been a momentum swing. And so we're all excited, and there's just a lot of talk between the team about it.
Yeah, joy is a good word to be using when we're talking about our own businesses. And Darek, fortunately, we get to learn not only from our own experiences in our careers, but also we get to learn from others. And that's why I'm so grateful for you to be here on the air with us. You mentioned bad management versus good management. Give us some of those insights, because we've all seen it in action, but to articulate it and to be self-reflective and to really look at the observations that we've had along the way, that's where the value is. So I'd love to hear some of your insights about bad versus good management.
So interesting. I'm not sure if I mentioned this to you, Brian, but I'm writing a book right now on Team We. And the whole concept behind it is, how do we look at ourselves to improve our team? And to generate and create a team, I have to be cognizant of myself and how I behave and how I do things. I have found that the managers that I've worked with or worked for who really struggled were the ones that weren't very aware of their own, who they were and what they were about. They struggled with communicating with people. They struggled with getting people to work with them because they didn't even know themselves. Those managers who were really incredible managers I worked for, I have one, I talk about him all the time, from back in early 90s, I worked for a guy who ran a restaurant. And I remember just watching him. He was so self-confident, not in an arrogant way, but just he knew himself. He knew who he was. He wasn't, I think the term we use now is vulnerable. He would talk about himself and the things he had gone through and the problems he had in relationships and all these kind of things. And I want to model myself after that as a leader. And I think leaders who are successful are vulnerable, are willing to talk about themselves, are willing to make a connection with their team so that they can help each other succeed.
Yeah, it's funny. Here you and I are on the air on a business podcast, and you own an IT managed service provider, yet we haven't talked about IT just yet. And what I find fascinating about that is I've always kind of felt like we have some misleading terms in the world of business. One of those that I'll call out is B2B. We always make it seem like, a business to business, operates between businesses, when at the end of the day, even if you're doing a B2B deal, it's human beings at the table. It's human beings making decisions whether to work with each other or not. What I find fascinating about your approach is that you will even apply that to the nature of the work that your company does, is that you will look at relationships before technology. How does that work, Darek? Because it's counterintuitive to a lot of people, especially when they're just starting out in their entrepreneurial journey, is they need to prove, this is how good we are at what we do. These are all the important things, but you found relationships are that cornerstone. Talk to us about that approach.
Well, I would say that what brought this to me is as I was leaving the last company, the company that acquired us, I observed how many times a employee would leave and the clients they were responsible would start grumbling right after they left. And if they didn't intentionally put someone in place that was going to repair that relationship, the client would leave very quickly after that. So that meant that our service desk technicians, our employees who were front line, were way more important than I am. They're the ones that are making sure the clients stay. So it started to really percolate in my mind how important this relationship component is to technology. We think technology is this computer that sits on our desk, but I love asking people, what's their relationship with technology? And most of them roll their eyes and go, oh, that computer, it never works. It doesn't do what I want it to do. We need to change that from an IT provider standpoint. We need to make it a better relationship. There should be a positive relationship. It should be a value add, not a value drag. And that's what I really want to bring to this new company. It's about the relationship with your technology. If we have a good relationship as a provider with our clients, we can improve their relationship with technology.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you say that. I, as a millennial, and I've loved computers since I was a teenager, and I've always thought technology is the great enabler. This is the thing that powers and makes so many more things possible. Heck, a lot of the things we do behind the scenes to make a 7-day-a-week show possible wouldn't happen without technology and without AI and all these other rapidly changed software is obviously key to us. There's so many good advancements. Darek, what's your inkling? Why are people so frustrated with technology in the workplace, and how can we be part of that change that you talked about, that your company is obviously leading the way to change that narrative?
So I think you have to go back a little bit in history and the way technology got put into the workplace. Computers were plopped on people's desks and they're saying, use this. There was not much training. There was not much organization to it. It typically got put under the CFO because they wanted to control the cost. They didn't look at it as a value add. The large enterprise corporations would see it more of a value add and would put more money into it. But most companies, especially small businesses that I've dealt with, tend to be reluctant to spend money on technology because they don't see the value add. It's that thing that the employees use. It should just work. And I think there's a component of that where it should just work. But you also need to look at it as, what am I getting out of this? I have a great example that a friend of mine who runs a arts and crafts kind of organization, manufacturing group. And he did a whole implementation of a new ERP system, enterprise resource planning system. And I asked him why he did it. And he said, because my old one was getting old. And I said, well, what value are you getting out of the new one? He said, I don't care. I just wanted to work like my old one did. I'm like, well, then why did you change? Because my old one's getting old. Not because I'm going to see a value in putting this new system in. And so we had a long talk about how he could create value by putting that system in if he was willing to spend a little money on it, and really have a different mindset about what is technology doing for me. If I'm putting in a new ERP system, which runs my whole business, what new technology, what new tools can I integrate with that to make my business more efficient and make my employees more efficient in what they do. And there are so many examples out there. I went through this experience in, it was 2007 or 8. I implemented NetSuite with one of my companies I was working for. And I went to one of their big events 3 years into doing this implementation. And I was baffled at the volume of things that I could have been doing in those previous 2 years had I been engaged in that level. So I would say, if you're going to put a technology in, be engaged with it, be connected with it, figure out how it can be even more important to your business than just, I'm just replacing one with the other. I'm just going to keep this thing moving.
Yeah, that said, I'm actually curious to hear more about the catalyst or the spark for the people that you work with. What causes someone to reach out and put their hands in the air and say, okay, it's time. I need an IT provider? Because you're right. So many of us, either we take it for granted because it's just working, or we feel the pains and we just mindlessly, buy the next greatest solution in shiny object. What's typically the catalyst for people to reach out? Or is it something that you guys are proactively leading that charge and initiating those conversations?
So I think it's multifaceted. My first thought as you asked that question was pain. Most people do it because it's painful. They're in so much pain, they just need a change. So if they're a very small business, 10 people or so, I just had a client that just joined us a few months ago. They had the son of a friend who ran a dentist's office put in their IT because he knew IT. They were a startup, they were getting rolling, they were getting moving. It may not be the best way to do it, but I understand why they do it. They can't afford a lot, so they just had this kid come in because the kid knew more about technology than they did. At some point, they get into pain because the kid set it up the way a kid would set it up, not the way a corporation would set it up. So what we bring to companies is structure and organization, and having set up a number of companies or organized a number of companies. That is one way we end up there. We end up there a lot of times because providers don't recognize the importance of the relationship and the service. I've got one right now who just joined us who said, I'm frustrated because they think it's okay to wait for 3 days to respond to me. I've got a business to run. They don't understand my business. They don't understand what I do and why it's important that they get to us. So typically, I would say if they've already got IT, whether internal or external, they're in some kind of pain. Something has happened that's caused them. It's almost like you go to a counselor. So it's an IT counselor. Maybe I should rename the company. When they're in pain, they'll finally reach out and say, I need help, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. I feel like so many of our industries are driven by that, and it takes them, unfortunately, a lot of clients to go through that pain to recognize the value add, which we've talked about so much. But Darek, I promise you and I would both say relationships today. We've both absolutely lived up to that. So let's start tying some strategies and some real examples there, because we always hear, on its surface, that's such simple advice for both of us to give listeners is, relationships matter. But what do relationships mean for you? I love, it's something that I saw you write somewhere, that you want us both to be at each other's retirement parties. How do you get to that point in that relationship building? Is it understanding them as people outside of the work that you're doing? Is it conversations? Is it bonds over experiences? I'd love to hear some insights in what relationships and relationship management means to you.
So I would tell you, honesty matters and trust. Obviously, those are two important components of relationships. I'll give you an example. When we bought the company in 2016, about a month prior, I got a phone call from somebody who was looking for IT support in New Jersey, but they were based in Ohio. He and I had a great conversation. We ended up bringing them on board. We just bought the company. Things were a bit of a mess. We had lost a big client. We really hadn't right-sized the company yet. Organization was struggling. And about a year in, he came to me and said, I'm not really happy. And I said, I was vulnerable at that moment. And I said, yeah, I'm really struggling too. And he said, well, what's going on? And so we started talking about what I was struggling with. And he gave me a bunch of suggestions, including one was to join this CEO group that he was involved in that has groups throughout the country. And that was a key pivotal moment to change our relationship. He became not just a client, but a colleague, a friend. I'm still friends with him today. I actually tried to do an RFP for his company because they were changing providers. We didn't win. I still consider him a very good friend. And I hope to be at his retirement party. That's actually where I came up with that idea. I would like to be at his retirement party, and I hope he's at mine. We've become that connected as a trusted friend. If I had a struggle or if I was in Ohio and needed help, I know I could reach out to him. And that to me is how you build really strong bonds with your clients, is really connecting on a bigger level. I talk about this all the time. I try to reach out to my clients on a personal level more than just a business level. I really like the people I work with, and I want to be part of their team in some way.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, is getting away from those canned replies that we're all so used to. In today's world, if you ask someone, how are you doing? They're going to say, I'm doing great. How are you doing? And so those are canned replies that we hear all day long. I think it's so much more important. You were generous with your thoughts. I mean, he didn't ask to hear about those things, but you offered. And I think that that's the type of generosity that really helps people stand out and make those personal connections. Along those lines, Darek, I feel like so much of it, and clearly it's teased in the book that you're working on, so much of it comes back to looking inward and being self-aware. I'd love to get some insights into what Darek's personal executive time looks like when you sit back and when you zoom out in your businesses, because it sounds like you're managing so many different parts of your businesses, and you obviously have, of lost contracts, of right-sizing your company as far as your team size. Where does that come from? Are you carving out intentional executive time in your week? Are you, hitting the golf course and just clearing your mind that way? I'd love to hear some of those real life insights.
So I am a competitive swimmer. I swam competitively growing up. I still swim competitively. I go to Masters Nationals regularly. I run regularly. Those are my things to clear my head. I also do a lot of stuff around my house. I love to garden and do other things. I'm working on a big project right now, moving a wall in our breezeway between our garage and our house. So I do things to clear my mind, but I'm also an extreme extrovert. So as one of my mentors will say, most people will know my decisions before I do, because I'll talk through them all with everybody. And that's who I am. So I need to be engaged with people. I need to connect with people. I think for me, as far as a leadership goes, is I need to also be aware of my people. One of the things we've done is implemented something called Traction, which you may or may not have heard of. It's the entrepreneur operating system. And we did it at the last company. And once we did it, we really became a problem-solving company. And we solved, I think one year we solved 350 problems that we had on a list. And it really helped organize us and focus us. So I'm a lack of focus guy. I can think of 1,000 ideas a minute. So I need to be very aware of that skill. And I have people on my team that will constantly remind me, focus. Are you focused? Are we focused? Are we focused on the right thing? And so I think it's putting all those pieces in place. And you mentioned the book, and part of that book is really getting the right members of the team on place. And that also means healthy challenging, that people are okay with challenging others with ideas or thoughts, or argue and argue in a productive way. That those are all important parts of a relationship that in honesty and being vulnerable myself, I struggle with, because I grew up in a family that didn't argue. We pushed everything under the carpet. And so I got into a marriage with a wife who is perfectly fine with arguing. It took me a long time to get comfortable with that. And then I've slowly began to bring that into work, where I'm okay watching team members argue. And as long as it doesn't get personal, let them go at it. Let them, I don't like the word fight. I think it's just passionately argue for their position. And I think that's all part of that. Key is, how do we structure ourselves? So you asked about the structured time. I have to put time in the calendar. I am diligent about my calendar. So this afternoon, I have time to go swim. I'm going to go take some time, clear my head, and get in the water. Tomorrow, I'm going to go for a run. I'm working tomorrow night on some of that project in the house. I put time on the calendar for these things. I even have sales. Right now, I have on my calendar 3 days a week, because that's my focus. My team wants me to focus on sales. So I have 3 days a week. I have 2 hours blocked off for just sales functions. And then I know that I can stay focused, because I will get distracted by whatever's out there.
Yeah, Darek, I love those real life insights. It's very cool to hear about your personal life and how you align that with your business life. And as a passionate arguer myself, Darek, we call that debating. That's the way.
Yeah, I need to use that term more.
100%. I'm sure your wife would support that as well. It's just a healthy debate to get to the correct outcome that you both are aligned on. Yeah. So it's really cool hearing that mindset that goes along with all of that. And this is probably a bit of a softball question for you in your space, but but I feel like societally it's something that a lot of people are asking, and that obviously is about the impacts of AI. And a lot of people are looking towards how AI is going to take away jobs. It seems to me, just knowing the space that you very intentionally are in, that it's actually going to prop up so many needs. It's going to prop up the support that people need in order to leverage AI. What's your take on that more macro level impacts and effects of AI on the economy, on industries, and of course in your industry as well?
Well, I would start with, it's going to stay here. It's here. So either you learn about it, grow with it, understand it, or you're going to get kind of run over by it. I think a lot of our approach right now is, and we're going to be coming out with some of this marketing material in the next few weeks, is around, do you even have a policy? I ran into another guy who I'm in my CEO group, who they don't have an AI policy. And he said to me, I'm going to fire my marketing guy. And I said, why? And he said, because he's only working 2 hours a day. And I said, well, how do you know he's only working 2 hours a day? And he said, well, we tracked what he was doing because he works remote and he's only on the computer for 2 hours a day. I said, what is he doing? I mean, actually, I asked him, is he doing his job? And he said, yeah, he's doing everything we ask him to, but he's doing it in 2 hours. I said, you're going to fire him? Maybe you should find out why and what he's doing. And it turned out he was using AI 2 hours a day. He was getting all his work done and going off and doing whatever he wanted to do for the rest of the day because he was doing what he asked him to do. The problem is, and this is where he could get them in trouble, is that if you know anything about the basics of AI, if they offer you a free account, it's because they get something from you. Just think of Facebook or X or any of those platforms. They give you a free account because they own your data. Well, ChatGPT does the same thing. If you have a free account, they own your data. So whatever you put in there, they're using. If you do the paid account, then you can keep it secure and separate. And I'm generalizing a bit there, but the key there was that he was putting corporate data out through free ChatGPT. So that was a problem. And what I said to him is, that means you don't have a corporate policy on AI. And if I were a new startup company, and I was recommending anything to people, is I would sit down and figure out what your AI policy is, because your people are using it, whether you know it or not. Marketing is the key. One of the things I like to listen to, a friend of mine who's a CTO out in the Midwest, he said, what people don't understand, there's 2 types of AI right now. There's what we call administrative AI, things that help you in your administrative tasks, putting together PowerPoints, scheduling meetings, taking notes for meetings, all those kind of things are really administrative tools. But then what's coming, and it hasn't really been fully baked, is the more operational AI that's going to make more efficiency on the operation side. And it's being rolled out now. Understanding what people are using it for, how they're using it, how you're going to allow it to be used in your business, making sure you understand it's being used. And then the people who are really good at it, they're using them to help train your other people, to get them to use it, to be more efficient. And I think employees will, I think there's a huge benefit, but as I listened to, and I'm forgetting his name, but he's the head of AI for Google. He was on 60 Minutes a few weeks ago, and he talks about how their AI is going to change the world. The problem is we don't have guardrails. And I would start with, companies need to have their own guardrails. And hopefully at some point from a governmental standpoint, we'll have some guardrails, because right now there are none. And that's the scary part, which everybody kind of fears.
Yeah, for sure. Scary considerations, exciting considerations in other ways. There's so much food for thought. But Darek, I really appreciate your insights, because, you guys are going to help companies and small businesses usher in those guardrails, usher in their internal policies. And I think that these considerations from your IT perspective are incredibly important. You're right. Even that example that you gave, so many of us don't think about what we're feeding into AI. And those are all parts of our IT systems. ChatGPT recently rolled out connections, where ChatGPT now has entire access to your Google Drive and all your folders and your SharePoint and all of these things, which all come into the IT stack. So we're going to drop your links in just a minute for people who are thinking to themselves, I've never talked to an IT managed service provider. Maybe this is a conversation worth having. We're going to get there in a second. But before we do, Darek, I always love asking guests this question. It's super broad. You can take it in any direction you want. And that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners, considering the fact that we're being listened to by both wantrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys. And knowing that you are not only an entrepreneur, but you are that true CEO fulfilling that executive role, what's that piece of advice you want to leave our listeners with?
I would say for me, it is about team, and that's why I'm writing this book, because I've really learned, I think entrepreneurs, as you call them, or even CEOs, can get stuck in the mindset that it's them, that they're the ones that have to make the decisions, drive the bus, control everything, even that it really is who you bring around you, who you connect with, how important those relationships are. I have a CFO that I'm working with right now who I met through weird circumstances from the last company, and he has been such a value add, and he's so different than me. He's a CFO at heart. He's a numbers guy. He's very structured, very organized. I'm the flighty, visionary kind of guy. And we have connected on a level that I would have never expected. And I'm so excited to have him on our team. Our COO is somebody that I've worked with for 15, almost 20 years, in and out. He's been in the industry for a long time. So from an operational standpoint, he knows the industry in and out. I think those people are all so important. Even my board chairperson, who's bought and sold businesses, done what I've done, but on a much bigger level, just everybody and connected to the technician that we have. He jumped on the bandwagon early. He joined us when we had 1-2 clients, and became part of our team and has been so valuable to us. All of those people make it important, and I need to remember to sing their praises. It's not about me. I'm just playing the orchestra thing, as I said earlier. I'm the conductor, and there are a lot of really talented people around me. So if you're getting into it, if you're excited about being an entrepreneur, I have a young guy that I'm mentoring right now who's actually doing some work for our company because he wants to be an entrepreneur. That I just love his passion. I love where he's at. And he says he's learning a ton from me because he sees how important all the other people are. It's really easy to get sucked into our own thinking in our own space, but it's about those other people.
Yes, so well said. I'm so grateful that's the advice that you're imparting on our listeners today. Obviously pulling from a depth and breadth of your own personal experiences across so many different businesses, and even as an intrapreneur. I'm willing to bet you were quite intrapreneurial in the companies that you worked inside of. So Darek, I so appreciate these words of advice. I'm also really excited. I think that the brand that you've built with this iteration of your company, the work that you're doing, the people will see that everything that you were here on the air today is represented in how your brand shows up. The word relationship is all over your website, so I'm very excited for people to check out all the great work that you're doing. So Darek, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
So our website is www.AffinIT without a Y, so it's AffinIT, MSP for managed service provider.com. So AffinIT without a Y, MSP.com. And you can drop me a note at Darek.Hahn, and it's DAREK. Hahn at AffinityMSP.com. Would love to chat, and if you just want some advice, I'm more than willing to give it. I'm open book.
Yes, I so appreciate that. Listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find that link down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. So if you're driving, you're at the gym, and you think to yourself, how am I going to remember that URL? Don't worry, it's down below. You can click right on through. We're also linking to Darek's personal LinkedIn, so if you want to continue the conversation there and have an incredible entrepreneur in your network, you've heard how much he loves mentorship, how much he loves surrounding himself with other big visionary thinkers who are running their companies in the right way, relationship oriented. Don't be shy in reaching out. Otherwise, Darek, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Really appreciate you having me. It was exciting and fun. Thanks.